demanded that every other candidate in this race either sign this commitment to pardon on January 20th, 2025, or else to explain why they are not.
We need to have other leaders that step up and make it clear that these are very serious allegations, that the Republican Party doesn't tolerate misuse of classified information.
If Donald Trump's president, will be all about retribution for him personally.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. There is a line in William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest, that is, I submit, eerily relevant to our times. What is past is prologue. That line is spoken as two characters contemplate a significant crime. Its meaning is this: all events of the past make what is about to happen not only possible, but inevitable. That's the implication. Those words, what's past is prologue, are engraved beneath a statue in front of the National Archives building, within which you will find the National Archives and Records Administration, the agency very near the center of the 37-count federal indictment former President Trump pled not guilty to yesterday in Miami. Now, to Trump critics, all his past behavior, his orientation to norms, laws, the Constitution, and truth made his alleged mishandling of classified documents and the subsequent investigation and indictment inevitable. To Trump's supporters, a biased legal system that assumes the worst of Trump while treating others, specifically they would say Democrats, with kid gloves, was bound to throw the book selectively at Trump. The indictment, because of this bias, they would say, thus inevitable. For both sides, what's past is prologue. The Archives building tells us of this truth. What's left is for our system of laws to adjudicate the facts and apply the law justly, while politics swirls like a tempest around it. Robert Costa and Scott MacFarlane join us now. Robert is CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent. Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Robert, I'd like to play you a mashup of some sound from three people who worked for former President Trump: Mike Pompeo, Bill Barr, and Mick Mulvaney. Let's take a listen to that.
If even half of it is true, then he's toast. I mean, it's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning.
I think the chances of a guilty verdict are fairly high, and the chances of real jail time are pretty high.
President Trump had classified documents where he shouldn't have had them, and then when given the opportunity to return them, he chose not to do that. That's inconsistent with protecting America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And if the allegations are true, some of these were pretty serious, important documents.
Robert, evaluate those sound bites because they come from three people: Mick Mulvaney, former acting chief of staff; Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, CIA director; and Bill Barr, Attorney General, all at the nexus of decisions about law, national security, and presidential procedure. What does that mean?
As a political reporter, to me, it's interesting. It's interesting to start to hear the sound of cracking inside the Republican establishment among some former Trump supporters, some kind of Trump supporters right now, gently questioning his alleged conduct, wondering what this all means, perhaps offering an alternative candidacy. But it's only interesting because what really matters is where are Republican voters on this? And I don't see, based on my recent travels to Iowa, my recent travels to New Hampshire and South Carolina, any kind of new break with Trump. If anything, I'm hearing a bit of an echo of the grievances of Trump himself.
And do you think when those Trump supporters hear people who once formerly worked for the president, was chosen by him to work for him, make comments like that, do you think that might have any effect?
Trump's this overwhelming shadow over the Republican Party. He suffocates his rivals. They can't get political oxygen in an environment where his indictments are the headline day after day after day. And if you're getting 25 people to show up for your event in Iowa, you may find you're favorably getting a reception and you're slowly making progress in the race. But Trump's a global story. So how do you eat into a global story? They haven't really found a way around that, but they don't want to endorse him. They don't want to support what's alleged in this indictment. But no one really wants to take him on directly, except Christie. Christie's out there playing a role. I thought maybe New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who decided not to run, was going to play. Christie's comfortable in this role. The New Jersey brawler, famous for doing his town halls, or infamous, depending on whom you ask.
Right. Scott MacFarlane back on Capitol Hill after a day of tremendous reportage from Miami yesterday. What is the sounding up on the Hill today?
Yeah, there's reaction, as you'd imagine, to the historic American moment that unfolded yesterday. But first, a couple housekeeping things, Major. We are now checking the court docket of United States of America versus Donald J. Trump and Walter Nada every 5 minutes. And here's the update from the most recent 5 minutes. Nada will be arraigned June 27th. They couldn't do that yesterday. He didn't have local counsel of record. So in about 2 weeks, he may appear in person. He may appear virtually. He'll be arraigned, and we're still waiting on the next court date in this case and a determination as to whether it's going to move from Miami to elsewhere in the Southern District of Florida. Let's put that aside. The politics here on Capitol Hill. Oh, you sure summed it up best. What's past is prologue. Fierce party line divisions on the reaction to this indictment. There are some interesting statements coming out of Senate Republicans, but they speak more about practicalities than principles. Some Senate Republicans, including John Thune, saying there's an electability issue here, that Donald Trump lost the last few election cycles for Republicans and is poised to do the same next year if he's the nominee. In the U.S. House, let me let you listen to two different Virginia members of Congress. They have neighboring districts. Just listen to the divide right down party lines.
As a former CIA case officer, I used to collect classified information or the information that flowed into classified reports. You know, I collected the information. It was never mine. It belongs to the United States government.
And I think any fair-minded person recognizes that the charges against President Trump are politically motivated. We've never treated another president, previous president, to this degree. Who's, you know, and it's been very common, President to leave the White House, that there's negotiations, discussions back and forth about materials that are taken from the White House. That happened with President Obama, happened with President Clinton, and yet we're trying to make, I guess, some kind of a political example out of President Trump. I think the polls are overwhelmingly demonstrated most Americans believe it's politically motivated. I think it is as well.
So that politically divisive debate continues, but here's one thing everybody agrees on. This is consuming the news cycles, the political news cycles here on Capitol Hill. Donald Trump is still casting a shadow over everybody else in federal government.
I want to play for Robert and you, Scott, a new sound today from the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, about this question of political motivation and Jack Smith, the special counsel. Let's take a quick listen.
As I said when I appointed Mr. Smith, I did so because it underscores the Justice Department's commitment to both independence and accountability. Mr. Smith is a veteran career prosecutor. He has assembled a group of experienced and talented prosecutors and agents who share his commitment to integrity and the rule of law.
And Robert, to your point from a moment ago, I was in Bedminster last night, and I can tell you that it is, in two instances, more capable for the former president and his political apparatus to draw a larger crowd for a post-indictment cocktail party than it is for some Republicans to gather a crowd in Iowa or New Hampshire.
That might be, Major, but I think the news today is fascinating because, you know, I sometimes take a walk around Georgetown to go look at where JFK used to live, and that famous moment after he wins the presidency in 1960, he opens the door to tell the reporters who his next attorney general is going to be, and he says, "It's Bobby." And he just whispers it because he doesn't want to make a big deal out of it because he knows the Justice Department at the end of the day is an independent law enforcement institution within the federal government that has a presidential appointee in the attorney general, but it operates independently. There's always been a healthy tension between the presidency and the Justice Department in our system. But it's important for Garland, in his view, based on our reporting, to get out there and underscore that this is an independent investigation not being led by Biden. But Trump, as you were there last night, he keeps hammering his false claim that this is an investigation that's in some way being directed by Biden.
Driven by the president for political reasons. Scott, any other reactions of note that you heard today on Capitol Hill after yesterday's historic developments in Miami?
There's a lot of questions being asked to us by people on Capitol Hill, knowing we were there at the courthouse yesterday, about what is the timetable for all this. It really underwrites everything, doesn't it? When is this thing going to move toward a possible trial date that has all kinds of implications, not just on the White House race in 2024, but in the re-election races of every single member of the U.S. House and nearly a third of the U.S. Senate in a pivotal year for Senate elections. One senior Republican in the Senate told us today they're watching closely the Trump effect on those very competitive races.
And if you thought an indictment consumed all available media space, wait until, if there is, a trial comes. Robert Costa and Scott McFarland, we thank you very much. Up next, more on the federal charges against former President Trump. I'll speak with one of his attorneys who is acting as a spokesperson in the case about the charges. That's coming up after the break. You are streaming America Decides. Up next, more on the federal charges against former President Trump. I'll speak with one of his attorneys who is acting as a spokesperson in the case about the charges. That's coming up after the break. You are streaming America Decides. Former President Trump pleaded not guilty to 37 criminal charges in a Miami federal courthouse on Tuesday. And if you missed that news, I certainly hope you enjoyed doing whatever it was you were doing, not watching that news. Trump attorney Alina Habba joins me now. She's also the spokeswoman for the former president. And to that point, Alina, thank you so much for joining us. What role will you play on former President Trump's legal team in this particular matter with the special counsel? Will you be a litigator and a spokesperson, or principally a spokesperson on behalf of the legal team?
Yeah, no, principally a spokesperson. I'm not licensed in Florida, and I'm not a criminal attorney. My focus has always been on the civil litigation for the president.
Understood. And in that regard, Alina, will there be enough legal representation for the president in this matter and any other pending matter?
Of course. I don't think America has a shortage of lawyers, that's for sure. And I think there's this misconception that has been put out there that there is a shortage of lawyers willing and wanting to work for President Trump is frankly false. I can tell you because I have personal knowledge of that. We have so much and so many inquiries and people that would love to take this case because, frankly, he is the world's most famous human being, and that is just a fact. So for any attorney to get the privilege to work for President Trump is, catapults your career and is, frankly, an honor.
So no shortage, no inability to fill the slots necessary for a fulsome defense of the former president. Okay, is the team that will focus on this 37-count indictment fully formed as we speak?
We are almost there. We have two that have already appeared. I can't really discuss privileged information on legal strategy, but we have two incredibly well-known criminal attorneys that appeared on his behalf on yesterday at the arraignment. Chris Kise, Todd Blanche, and we may add some additional manpower that is just fully Florida bar-based. So we'll see, but we're making those decisions and been talking to a lot of people and deciding who's going to be best for him.
Alina, there is some reporting out today that former President Trump and by extension the legal team, quote, anticipates more indictments. Is that true?
If you're watching the news like we all are and hearing the leaks through the news, of course, that's what we hear. We have the DA in Georgia who's indicated that she would want nothing more than to bring charges against President Trump. And these are all, very extreme radical left DAs and AGs. And it's really political warfare, not lawfare. And it's sad. There's really not supposed to be a place for it. But if you look at the timing, if you look at the movement, it's very clear what's going on. So, yeah, of course, we expect it. He's the leading candidate for the party. So they're coming after him hard.
Let's talk about the case that the president pled not guilty to yesterday. As you understand it, and as the strategy is currently developing, will there be a move to summarily dismiss the charges?
For sure. I'm sure there will be.
And that will be at the beginning of the proceedings.
I'm going to let them decide. That's a criminal attorney decision, and the team on the case need to decide what they want to do, whether they want to see some discovery, whether they want to go through a little bit and then decide. It has to have teeth, obviously. So I think we frankly already have enough teeth just from what we've gotten through leaks and reports and the misconduct that we heard with one of the prosecutors discussing something with a witness's attorney and a judgeship. That in itself is misconduct. So let's, I'm not going to get into anything that's privileged, of course, but I think you can bet your hat on it that we'll be looking to dismiss this entirely.
Right. And if this goes forward and the prosecution presents its case, you have among the many options available to the defense team a Rule 29 motion to dismiss then. Is that something that the team is looking at?
Right. I'm not going to discuss our strategy in detail, but they're talking about all options.
I'm correct that that is an option.
Of course, a dismissal option is an option. Like I said, I'm not a criminal attorney, so when to do it and what they want to do is up to them.
Will the team seek to suppress the notes and recordings of Evan Corcoran?
I'm sure. Again, that's going to be something that they're going to decide at the time. I think we all followed that, to seal, and I can speak generally, right? I'm an attorney. Attorney-client privilege for anybody, for you, for me, to have an attorney-client privilege broken and ordered by a judge is incredibly intrusive. And that bar to get that kind of privilege unraveled is very frightening. And I think it was inappropriate, frankly. I think that there has to be, for the American people, for anybody in this country, the right to seek counsel, the right to speak to counsel, and the right to believe that your conversations with your attorneys are privileged, especially when there was no crime. So I'm sure that will be addressed. I do not doubt that.
Is there any belief within the legal team that anything that has been presented publicly in the indictment was manipulated or planted in terms of evidence or portrayals of such evidence?
Yeah, I won't, again, say what the legal team discusses. That's obviously privileged, like we just discussed. I can tell you as
well, the former president has in various ways on social media and elsewhere suggested that that's possibly true, or he believes it to be true.
Right. As I was just about to say before you interrupted me, that is something that I know has been put out there and is something that we need to see if it happened. You have to remember when the raid happened, there were no attorneys allowed to be in the space. They were told to leave. That happened. They actually didn't even want cameras on. They wanted them turned off. So that was another thing that happened. And as we unravel, and I just want to say this because a lot of your questions seem to be ones that go to privilege, and I'm sorry that I won't break that privilege, but as this unravels, I just think it's important for the American people to understand something. An indictment is one-sided. An indictment is cherry-picked and put and pieced together by the witnesses they selected. And we were not there. We were not in the grand jury. We do not know what they did and didn't do. So all of that, we now get the opportunity to see and put on our defense. That's how this works.
And in that process of seeking discovery, that and other things you will try to discern. Is that correct?
Of course, of course. I mean, you can't try a case, any case, criminal or civil, without discovery. We need to see what happened. We need to get depositions. We need our turn to take them in and ask questions. So, yeah, of course, that would be part of any case.
Alina Habba, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Former South Carolina Republican Governor Nikki Haley has suggested that former President Trump's actions in regard to classified documents could have threatened national security. Next, we will take a look at her campaign and the latest on the Republican field. You are streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez has just filed paperwork to officially jump into the 2024 presidential election, joining an already crowded Republican field. Caton Dawson joins us now. He's the former South Carolina Republican Party chair and a Nikki Haley campaign surrogate. Caton, let me ask you a question and be as candid as you possibly can. If the South Carolina Republican presidential primary were held today, who would win?
Well, Major, that's not a hard question to answer because I think what our viewers don't understand that you and I do know is they're winner-take-all primaries. If it was a runoff, it'd be Nikki Haley, but there's not going to be a runoff. Donald Trump's got a solid 35 or 40%, got about a 6% bump in the first indictment. So the base that he has is pretty solid. But Major, it's early in this process. I watched your show earlier, and it broke down real well where we are in this process. I think what I tell you as a lifelong Republican and doing it a long time, this is a mix between Watergate and Whitewater, and special prosecutors both places. except Donald Trump is not a sitting president. He acts like he is with all the detail he has and the planes and the cars and the events, but he's not. So I think it's a long, hot summer. He's winning right now. He'll win in the short run because he's sucking the oxygen out of everybody's campaign. But there's going to be a moment that people are going to have a chance to break out. We've got some wonderful candidates. There are too many, Major. There are too many, and they'll weed themselves out between now and Labor Day because they'll run out of money.
Under the banner of possibly too many candidates, Miami Mayor Francis Suarez is just jumping in. Your reaction to that, to the degree you might have some?
Major, I saw that he's a very interesting candidate. He brings a whole nother dynamic to the race. First of all, let's see if he can raise $50 million. That's what it takes. You got to start off with about $10 million and see if he can do it. I mean, Chris Christie just got in, another well-known figure. Mayor Suarez is not very well-known, but it is interesting that he's in the race. I think a lot of people are seeing that there's a chance for a fissure here in this 36 or 34 count indictment that the president's under. And again, that you've watched the news, that's all you've gotten all day today, Major. And that might be good for the president right now, for President Trump. It's horrible for the Republican Party at the moment.
Why?
Well, right now we've got to live through the summer of 37 indictments. We've got to listen to whether national security was affected. You look at the documents, Major, and you've been doing this a long time. When you start reading the stuff about nuclear secrets, Iran battle plans, and this stuff, and I listened to what Governor Christie had to say, and he made some valid points that we didn't have to be here. I know the base sees this as a political, unfortunate event where the Democrats aren't being indicted and Republicans are. But we've now got to wade through the fact that there's a lot of stuff sitting in those documents that we're never going to see. We're never going to see the redacted parts. And it's going to throw out. I talked to some people yesterday and asked, if you thought that there were national security secrets that would affect our armed forces, what would be your opinion? And I got back one after the other. I'd have to change my mind on President Trump.
To that point, the candidate you're a surrogate for, Nikki Haley, said that the president was reckless. I think she said extremely reckless. But then she also said if it were brought to her desk as president, she would very seriously consider pardoning former President Trump if he were convicted on these charges. How do you reconcile those?
I reconcile that we're going to be so worn out with this by the time we get there, Major. This is going to be going on all the way till Election Day, most likely. And whether Trump stays in the race and whatever happens, I understand where Governor Haley's coming from. We are already worn out with all this stuff. We had a midterms where we should have wiped up the deck as Republicans, and we didn't. We barely won the majority in the House. Thank God for that. But at the end of the day, I understand what Nikki's saying is. I think just like we saw the past presidents and their problems, the American public's going to get tired of all of this antics and personal politics and destruction and want to move past and start dealing with the deficit, dealing with the issues about China and things I think that matter to everyday Americans.
Kate, very quickly, you've invoked the name of Chris Christie a couple of times. He has said the only way to get the nomination is to run through Donald Trump. You cannot tiptoe around him. Do you agree?
I think there'll be a chance to sidestep around him at some time. You're going to have a couple of these people going to get together, Major. This is going to be a very unusual cycle. You're going to have some people picking some candidates to run with themselves. You're going to have a couple of debates. He's not going to show up, Major, unless y'all really start hammering him to show, because he doesn't have to. His ego might get him there, but the debates were the place where it won't be like 2016 where you can give everybody nicknames. It's going to be different. But let's see. It's a long summer, and we got a little while there, but right now it's the presidents to lose, and it's the presidents to drag us all down in the gutter where we don't want to be.
Caden Dawson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Major.
That does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You are streaming CBS News.